Chapter 4 Under Watchful Eye September 11th, 2007, 7:26 p.m. Sue's Corolla sped along the dark, tree-lined roads of rural Fairhaven. How such a coastal town with all of its quaint Cape Cod appeal could still contain a pocket of scarcely populated land was hard to fathom, but it was so. Now that the lights of strip malls and thickly settled residential areas were well behind her, Sue delighted in the refreshing vastness of the croplands, grazing fields, and patchy forest. According to the map on the passenger seat, Old Stable Lane was coming up fast. She eased her foot off the pedal while preparing to click her right-hand blinker.
"There you are,"
she said, spotting the signpost amidst a grove of birches. The white metal rectangle was at an odd angle atop the pole, with a thick layer of dust caked over its words. Her view of the sign became obscured upon making the turn onto the dirt road. Up ahead, a tight, winding passage ran forth under the beams of her car's headlights. Sue was careful to dodge the pitfalls of water-filled depressions that were everywhere. After rounding a sharp bend, the shining taillights of a Ford Explorer became evident. A hand protruded from the driver's side window and motioned for her to follow. Going ever so slowly to minimize the muddy sprays, they turned onto a crushed stone driveway. Sue's eyes enlarged as their lights washed across an enormous structure from left to right. The quick flash of wood and windows heightened her seriousness of purpose. From the looks of it, the house's capacity was well beyond the general needs of her family. Given the stockpile of effects to her name, this certainly could not be a bad thing. The cars continued clicking and clacking over the rugged surface until they reached the circular ending of the driveway, which was designed to accommodate 180-degree turns. Once the Corolla and Explorer rolled to a stop, Sue grabbed a notebook and hopped out onto the loose stones.
"Hi there, Pete."
The realtor slammed his door closed and tucked a clipboard under his arm. "Evening, Miss Blake." With a casual jut of his chin, he directed their attention to the sizable two family. "Any vibes?"
"I think it's best I let you know when we finish."
"Fair enough," he said, chuckling, and shook her hand. "I'm glad we decided to do this tonight. With yesterday's rain and everything, we'll be able to see if there's any problems with the roof or basement."
"I'm trying to be optimistic."
"As well you should. Come on, let's see what we've got." He leaned into his SUV and produced an industrial-sized flashlight. "With this baby, you won't even know the sun's gone down for the night. Check this out." A push of its button shot a powerful beam of white light against the side of the house.
"Wow, you could bring an airplane in with that thing."
"Wouldn't that be my luck?" Pete swung the revealing light back and forth in an effort to capture the house's fullness. Its form rose out of a mass of untamed shrubbery, and most of its front right corner was concealed by a towering oak.
"That must be a convenient ladder for the squirrels,"
Sue surmised. "What, the tree?"
"Yeah, I had to have one cut down beside my tenement. The squirrels were jumping over into the eaves and building nests. You wouldn't believe what they'll eat through. Wood, asphalt shingles, lead flashing, you name it."
"That can't be good."
"Nuh-uh, and they cost me a pretty penny, let me tell you."
She turned to look at the expansive house rising before her. The outer covering was a weathered, silvery shingling, with many of its wooden squares either curled or buckled from years of exposure to the elements.
"Goodness, this place is huge. Almost like a second house is attached to the back."
Pete referred to his clipboard. "Take a look. I've got a copy of the plot plan." The structure was exactly as she had said, two elongated boxes connected together, but offset slightly. Sue's eye wandered to something else that was included on the diagram. A second structure was dotted to the left of the house, only it had a faint ink mark slashed from corner to corner and the date 1976 written beside it.
"What's this? A garage?"
"No, believe it or not, there used to be a chapel here." He pointed to a tiny note at the bottom of the plan. "It says it burned to the ground in 76.
"How cool would that have been?"
Sue said with a snap of her fingers. Her creative juices were beginning to flow. Visions of shutters, window boxes, flowers, and a screen porch skittered through her head. She admonished herself with,
"Calm down, make sure not to miss anything,"
and turned her attention to various spots on the outer wall.
"It's got loads of windows, 12 on this side alone."
"Plenty of work for the maid," Pete kidded.
"And good light during the day."
Pete redirected the flashlight to a slate walkway. "You ready to move on?"
"Sure, I'm right behind you."
They followed the inlaid slabs around the oak tree to a set of granite porch steps at the front of the house. Pete brought the light upward to reveal a large, solid wood entry door. A lion-head knocker with a rich green patina stared down at them from the door's center. Thin borders of leaded glass windows framed the entrance. To Sue's dismay, the left-hand set of panes was badly bowed.
What a shame,
She whispered and noted it on her pad. She took several steps backward to get a better view of the looming facade. 2 arborvitae-covered windows flanked the door, 3 evenly spaced windows lined the second floor, and a single full-size window nestled well up into the peak of the house. "You ready?" Pete asked.
All set.
The walkway ended abruptly at the stairs, giving way to damp high grass. As they turned the front left corner of the house, Sue tugged gently on Pete's sport coat.
How about that fireplace, huh?
A large fieldstone chimney climbed the far side wall and headed skyward. "Actually, my sheet here says there are 4 in all, but a couple may not be in working order." His light flashed across more reflective panes, up a sturdy trellis that reached to the gutter, then spied a circular stained glass window on the second floor. "Nice craftsmanship there."
My word. Can you make it out?
"Kind of looks like a person, but I'm not sure. We'll be able to get a better look once we get inside,"
Very interesting.
she said while tallying the many windows spread across the first and second floors.
13 on this side, including the circular one.
She paused for an instant, obviously struck by a questioning thought, and began to write in her notebook. "Anything I can help you with?"
Maybe. Where are all the storm shutters?
Pete gave the full side of the house a once-over. "That's a good question.
Every window's got hinges, yet no shutters anywhere.
Must have got rid of them for one reason or another." Sue surrendered to the unknown with a lift of her shoulders.
No big deal.
At long last, they worked their way to the rear of the house. Pete panned the backyard with the light. "You can see the area where they've cleared back here."
It's nice and wide open.
"Yeah." Glancing at his numbers, he said, "And there's more where that came from, 1.5 acres to be exact.
How about the frontage?
It's 250 by 260 feet. A pretty big piece. I was told we'd be able to see the property line somewhere in the backwoods." He pointed his light at a trail that was cut into the distant trees. "There. See the stone wall?" Even though it was segmented by intermittent brush, Sue had no trouble getting the idea. "It supposedly runs all the way around. Normally, I'd tell you it's good to have such a definitive marker. But seeing as how we're in the middle of nowhere, it probably doesn't much matter. If I'm not mistaken, the closest neighbor is a farmer who lives way off from here, and I'm sure he could care less whose land ends where. That trail that I'm shining my light on, it connects this property to his land in the back. Now, if you look over that way," he said, swinging the beam to the right, "we've got all woods all the way to the main road." He turned and pointed to the left. "That's where the abandoned mine is. About, I'd say 500 yards from where the trees begin. I wouldn't recommend taking a walk in that direction at night, unless you have a death wish or something."
I'll pass on that.
"That's what I thought." He aimed the flashlight at the back of the house to expose a design that mirrored the front. The only difference was that it had an unimpressive back entry and a bulkhead to the cellar. "As I mentioned yesterday, one of my associates just got this listing, so please excuse me if I'm a little unsure of the specifics. I had a talk with her this morning and she pretty much described every inch. I hope I can get us through okay." Sue put him at ease by squatting low to pull a random weed.
I was meaning to ask, what's the story with the owners?
"Names are Ethel and Beatrice Pratt, a pair of old sisters who have picked up and headed for Florida."
Do you know how long they've been here?
"As a matter of fact, I do. The deed has them as sole owners since 1959. He paused and calculated the span on his fingers. 48 years.
Wow, long time.
Pete started up a set of rickety stairs to a metal door with a large paned glass insert. "Watch your footing. Just let me unlock this first." With a turn of the key, the door opened inward. He felt along the inside wall, fiddled with a few light switches, and soon had the hallway lit brightly. "I guess we won't be needing this any longer." He placed his flashlight into a mounted newspaper tube on the porch's wooden railing. "How about we start from the bottom up?"
It's as good a place as any.
"You may want to roll up your pants," he said, smiling. "Swimming may not be out of the question."
I'm sticking with optimism.
"Way to go. Come on." They slipped into the hallway to discover 2 closed doors to their right, as well as a stairway that led upward to the left. "I think it's over here," Pete declared, moving toward the first of 2 doors. When he swung it open and saw a step-down landing, he knew his guess was correct. He squinted at the row of switches on the wall. "One of those must be for down here. Want to give them a try?" Sue played with the toggles until the basement radiated with a soft glow. "Now that's what I call shedding light on the subject." A heavy, musty smell poured through the open door. "As far as what to expect, we shall see." They headed down a set of open back stairs to the sub-level. Upon reaching the concrete floor, Sue burst out laughing. A toilet, sat ridiculously in the middle of an expansive room. "Talk about lack of privacy," Pete said, strolling over to the out-of-place fixture. With a push of the knob on the porcelain tank, a gush of water whirled around the bowl.
I hope the other bathrooms are a little more conventional,
Sue remarked and bent to touch the floor.
Not one puddle.
"And I don't see a sump pump either. Land's got to have excellent drainage." Sue agreed with a nod and walked across the room to the water heaters.
What's the deal with these?
50-gallon upstairs, 30-gallon downstairs, electric, both 2 years old.
That's good. Wouldn't have to replace those anytime soon.
Just for your info, the cellar's just got the furnace, so that's all set too.
Oil?
Yes.
How about laundry hookups?
I don't think there are any. At least I don't see any faucets.
No biggie.
The electric service needs updating for both units. They're 60 amps with fuses. Pete patted his hand against one of the large cemented rocks that constituted the walls. "Sure is a sturdy foundation. These babies aren't going anywhere." Sue walked around the room, taking a quick inventory.
Did the Pratts already move everything out?
"Yes, I was told that the house is being sold as is. Anything that's left behind is included. Although judging from the remains in this room, it doesn't look like there's much worth saving."
Oh, I don't know about that. Look over here.
Her hand traced the outer edge of a wagon wheel that was propped against the wall.
This is one of a kind.
"Are you serious?"
Sure. You could do all sorts of stuff with something like this. All you need is a little creativity.
"The only use I would have for that would be to add it to the trash heap at the dump. I'm what you would call a creativity dolt." He took a theatrical bow before wandering over to a break in the foundation. "Hey, here's another room here. Looks like a root cellar." They proceeded through the doorway toward the front of the house. Along both sides, waist-high compartments had been constructed with a hodgepodge of mortared granite. A bed of sandy dirt filled each chamber to the rim. The most noteworthy and curious item of the room was occupying a wide section of floor near the far wall, a boulder of gigantic size.
What do you make of that?
Sue asked. "I'm not sure." As Pete went and circled the rock, Sue's focus shifted to the realtor's feet.
What's that?
"What?"
That.
she said, kneeling to inspect the thick black substance at the base of the boulder. A drag of her fingernail across the material removed a layer of black dirt, revealing a deep honey color. "What is it?"
I'm not sure. Beeswax, maybe?
The lines of Pete's face scrunched. Why would anyone put a ring of wax around the bottom of a rock?
Who knows?
Maybe it's covering an old septic tank.
Ooh, I hope not.
Sensing his foot in his mouth, Pete quickly initiated damage control. "No, it can't be. Building department would never allow it."
Maybe they just couldn't get it out of here when they dug the cellar.
"That's probably more like it," Pete admitted. "Whatever it is, it sure makes for a good conversation piece. I'll leave it at that." Sue smirked while jotting notes on her pad. "Listen, before we spend the whole night down here, why don't we move this tour to the rest of the house?"
My thoughts exactly,
Sue said, straightening from her crouch. "Come on, I'll show you upstairs." They retraced their path back to the first-floor hallway and opened the door next to the cellar entrance. Their footsteps brought them into an empty kitchen that featured a large open fireplace and plenty of counter and cabinet space.
My mother would love this,
Sue announced, her heels clocking a beat across the hardwood floor. The boards were darkened and scratched with age, but she could see the underlying potential. Over on the other side of the kitchen, Pete resumed his spiel. "There's a good-sized bedroom over here." Sue poked her head into the room and whistled at its generous space.
More hardwood.
They went back through the kitchen and entered a hallway which led to the middle of the house. Two doors opposed one another at its midpoint. One was to a coat closet, and the other concealed an antiquated bathroom.
I'm glad to see this potty has a door,
Sue said, tongue-in-cheek. They pushed to the end of the corridor to view a den with an elaborately carved fireplace. Pete walked over and placed his clipboard on the mantel. "If by any chance you're interested in buying, then you really should have these inspected. I've seen a few chimney fires. That's nothing to fool around with."
No question.
Two diminutive rooms were nestled to the right of the den. Each was gaudy with floral wallpaper and plain with white linoleum squares. Sue carefully added these rooms to her notebook. A remarkably accurate sketch of the house's layout was beginning to take shape. "All we've got is the front, and we'll be done with the first floor," Pete said, opening a French door into a spacious living room. Sue promptly observed that the wallpaper was badly discolored and raised along the seams.
It's been ages since this place had a facelift, huh?
"I was just thinking the same thing. Some cosmetics would do wonders." The front foyer sat behind another set of French doors. From Sue's vantage point, she could see a tempting snippet of the forthcoming view.
My goodness,
she whispered with a push on one of the paned doors. The sight before her was simply magnificent. A gorgeous staircase wrapped in a smooth curve up the outside wall to the second-floor landing. Sue's sweeping gaze of the rise was interrupted by an overhead spectacle. Without moving her eyes, she reached out and clicked a switch on the nearby wall. The cluster of bulbs and crystals that were suspended in the center of the foyer awakened into a wondrous twinkling of fragmented light.
Oh my! The chandelier is permanent, right?
As far as I know, my associate didn't say otherwise. Sue's stomach jumped as she scribbled,
Possible pair point, foyer.
Just as they were starting up the treads toward the second floor, Sue snatched Pete's arm. It was hard to imagine, but to this point both had failed to notice the most captivating feature of the room. The circular window they had witnessed from the outside was built into the wall about 2/3 of the way up the stairs and spanned approximately 4 feet in diameter. Its stained glass pieces came together to form a beautiful depiction of Christ's Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. St. Matthew 5:8 was lettered under his image.
Talk about breathtaking,
Sue said softly. After several seconds of silence, they continued up to the second-floor landing. Once there, Sue looked over the mahogany banister to the foyer below.
Yes,
she thought to herself. Everything up here should be the same as the first floor, Pete explained. Saying not a word, Sue headed through the living room to the den, with Pete following curiously behind. She walked into one of the adjoining small rooms and started rapping her knuckles lightly against the separating wall.
I wonder if this is bearing.
I'm not sure.
If it could be knocked out, this would become a 20 or so foot room. Perfect for my dining room furniture.
In the process of writing a series of notes to herself, she whisked through the den and into the bathroom in the hallway.
Hey, Pete, what inspired the Pratts to sell after living here for so many years?
I guess they've decided that keeping up with the housework is getting to be too much to handle.
This must be so traumatic for them.
Pete's salesman instinct sprang to life. Well, from what I hear, they're anxious to get this off their hands, and there's a lot of house for the buck here. Personally, I think this is a steal. It won't stick around for long, that's for sure. Sue took a few moments to test the water pressure by flushing the toilet and turning on the shower. Once satisfied, she ceased the flow.
May we take a look at the third floor?
Of course. I have to warn you, though. It's supposed to be a wreck up there.
No problem.
They strode from one side of the kitchen to the other until they came upon a narrow hallway. Well, this is it, Pete said with a gesture toward its endpoint. Sue was stunned at what she saw. Covering the door's entire surface was an intricate carving of a whaling scene.
Can you believe that?
It's unreal. These old New England homes are always good for a few surprises.
Too bad someone had to go and paint it over,
she observed while working her fingers across the rigging of a majestic bark. The doorknob was an old-fashioned latching mechanism, which Sue lifted with a pinch of the handle. Pulling firmly, the door opened on a set of squeaky hinges.
I don't think anyone's come through here in a while,
she said over her shoulder. The steep passageway led upward to an intermittent landing.
Do we have a light we can turn on? It's really hard to see.
Supposedly there's a string we can grab somewhere near the top of the stairs. Why don't I run down and get my flashlight?
That's okay. Just stick close and we'll be fine.
Feeling slightly spooked, Sue pushed her long hair behind her ears and laughed anxiously.
Well, here goes.
The backlit hallway was more unsettling than a help, as it sent their long shadows scuttling into the unexplored heights. Both were more affected than they were willing to admit. By the time they reached the landing, they were nearly one. A hard swallow got Sue around the corner. Everything became purely black. Pete could sense her uncertainty. You sure you don't want me to run down?
Don't be silly. We're almost there.
Suit yourself. Again, she pushed her hair from her face, though this time it was pointless.
These stairs better be here,
she whispered before blindly starting up the second flight. Unconsciously, her hand played in the forward darkness to undo the spiderwebs before they could undo her. The air was thicker here, like a noxious suspension of mothballs, dust, and age. When she finally reached the high point of the stairs, she was pleasantly surprised to locate the pull chain on her first stab. With a soft yank, an ancient bulb came to life above her head. From where she was positioned, she could make out 2 bedrooms and an open sitting area.
The kids would love it up here.
The entire length of the third floor was a tribute to extensive water damage. With large sheets of plaster either stained or sagged away from the ceiling and walls, the wide boards of the floor were warped and split in many areas and even missing in others. Sue gingerly towed ahead of her to see that all was nailed.
I'm going to push my luck.
Just don't go crashing into one of the rooms downstairs, that's all I ask.
Thanks for the warning.
Sue hopped daintily across a section of exposed floor joists and insulation and onto the open sitting area. A large aluminum washtub filled with several inches of stagnating water was positioned on the floor under a skylight. Not to state the obvious or anything, but I think it's safe to say the house needs a new roof, Pete declared, taking hold of the railing. He watched as Sue disappeared into a bedroom on the right. After waiting patiently for several seconds, a rhythmic squeak reached his ears. Hey, what's going on in there? She appeared at the doorway, smiling and wiping her hands across her ear.
Just had to try out the springs on the old cast-iron bed.
Pete laughed when he noticed the activity's lingering effects. You've got rust marks all over your backside. Sue twisted to get a glimpse.
Oops.
Well, how does it look in there?
Not bad. Some of the horsehair plaster's pulled away from the laths on one of the walls. Other than that, I'd say it's fine.
She continued into a long hallway that led toward the second bedroom at the front of the house. About midway down, she opened a small door to the left and stooped to inspect the space behind the wall.
This is all storage.
With an inquisitive expression, she crawled through the door and out of sight. Sue?
I'm okay. Hey, guess what I found?
What?
The shutters. A whole pile of them.
That solves that mystery. Content with her findings, she reemerged into the hallway and walked onward to the lone window in the front bedroom.
What a view from up here.
I'll have to take your word for it, Pete called, placing a hand atop his rotund belly. I'm as far as I can go. Though the light was dim, the entire bedroom appeared to be in fair quality. Of all the refinishing and renovating Sue had done in the past, this house seemed to beckon for her talented mind and hands to work their magic. It was undeniable. Her keen eye was totally taken by this diamond in the rough.
Incredible,
she whispered.
I could turn this into a showplace. It's everything we need.
She gathered herself together and started back toward her realtor. When she emerged from the hallway into the sitting room, he could not help but laugh. I've heard of getting down and dirty, but this is ridiculous. Deep gray filth covered Sue's knees and hands, while a smudge ran the width of her forehead from an earlier wiping of her brow. She scrutinized her appearance and broke into one of her attractive smiles.
Pete, I don't mess around.
I can see that. Hey, would you mind pulling the light on the way down?
No problem,
she replied, tiptoeing cautiously across the dangerous floorboards. Her hand found the swaying chain and cut the power. They descended the darkened stairway to the kitchen, where Pete asked the most important question of the showing. So, what do you think? Sue assumed her most convincing poker face before answering.
I certainly like what I've seen.
Want me to write up an offer for you? I've got the form right here.
The asking's $269.9, right?
Pete nodded affirmatively. Sue ran a hand along the countertop to stall while her mind ran the numbers. You could think it over if you like. A number popped, almost as if someone had whispered it in her ear.
No, I'd like to make an offer.
That's great, Pete exclaimed. Full?
No, I think I'm going to start at $250.
That should put you in the running, I would think. I'm going to need a check for $100 as a binder and an additional $12,004 should we go to the P&S with this.
You hold that in escrow until closing, right?
Of course, interest-bearing.
Super.
Once all of the paperwork was filled out and signed, they wrapped up their meeting and made their way out to the back porch. After double-checking the lock, Pete snapped on his flashlight. My office will let you know about the offer as soon as we hear anything.
I'll be waiting.
The realtor and customer walked over to the driveway where they ducked into their respective cars.
Thanks again, Pete,
Sue called through her open window. Anytime.
Talk to you soon.
With a soft toot of her horn, she drove off into the night. Self-defeat flapped over to Malevolence, who was perched on the gutter nearest the crushed stone driveway. In his irritating voice, he squeaked, Well? Malevolence flared his fangs and snorted a foul plume. It's too early to tell. We shall wait and see.
Are you sure we shouldn't report to the king?
Not yet. I will give the order only if the offer is accepted.
Very well. I'd get back to your post if I were you. before he suspects you've neglected your duty.
A look of terror lit in Self-Defeat's eyes. In a whoosh, he flapped back to his tree.